Welcome, everybody. This is Teens and Screens. Everybody here for Teens and Screens? Okay, good, good. If you were at the wrong place, we would tell you to stay anyway. Because honestly, this topic really, really matters. And just by way of a little bit of transparency, I actually have become much more familiar. Actually, let me ask this question. How many people here who are with us today have a social media account? Right, everybody, basically. And that syncs with the data because there are 5 billion people on this planet on social media. That is 63% of the world population. And 75% of the American population has a social media account. What I was about to say is that my experience with this topic, I have the privilege of moderating a bunch of panels here, but my experience is different because this was a topic that somebody came to me and my producing partner, Matt O'Neill, who's over there, and said, you got to make a documentary about this because that's what I do. And I thought, but we all know social media is somehow not good for teens or that there are problems with social media. And they said, no, you have to know exactly what's going on. And the truth of the matter is, I guess everyone here has some sense that social media can be problematic for kids. What I learned is it can be devastating. I want to give a little bit of data before I introduce you to our wonderful panelists. Studies have shown that young people with frequent social media use will experience brain changes. And those brain changes start to look like an addicted brain, whether it's gambling or alcohol or drugs. They actually can see physical changes. And Mitch, who's down at the end, Dr. Mitch Prinstein, is going to talk a little bit about some of the biology in addition to the psychology of what's going on. It's more than just addiction. 1/3 of all adolescents who are on social media are at some point exposed to serious hate-based content on social media. And about the same percentage of young girls will see sexually explicit content, are you ready for this? Within the first week that they are on social media. And we'll talk about that as well. And then when it comes to young boys, there was a study that was recently completed from Dublin City University where they tracked and recorded the content recommended to accounts on TikTok and YouTube for all 16 to 18-year-old boys. They used blank phones, and within 23 minutes, all of the boys had received misogynistic, anti-feminist, and extremist content without, and this is the important part, and we're going to get into this in some real detail, without searching for it. So it's not like they went on and they said, I want to see this kind of content. This is what was fed to them by the algorithms. All right, I've set the stage. Now I'm going to introduce you to some extraordinary panelists, and I say that because we have been working in this field for some time, and we're working with Laura and we're working with Amy Neville. Laura Marquez Garrett is sitting right over here. She's an attorney with the Social Media Victims Law Center. It's a law firm focused solely on holding social media companies legally accountable and to make their products safer for children, to hold them accountable to do that. The firm, which was not formed until 2021, currently represents 2,500 families throughout the country. So there's a reaction sometimes for people to say to us, well, you're just talking about the edge cases. We are not talking about the edge cases at all. So just wanted to give you sort of a sense of the scope. Amy Neville. And I want to say this because Amy is here. She is the president of the Alexander Neville Foundation. Alexander is Amy's 14-year-old beloved son who died after taking a pill that he bought on Snapchat that he thought was something that was fentanyl. And I know that everybody knows this, but it takes an incredible amount of bravery to come out here and talk about something as devastating as the loss of the child. And Amy, it really is. And the only reason that Amy and other parents like Amy do this and talk and share their stories, whether it's on our documentary or in panels like this, is because they want their experience never to happen again. Dr. Mitch Prinstein is the Chief Science Officer of the American Psychological Association. He is a distinguished researcher in the field of adolescent mental health. He chaired the APA Social Media Health Advisory Group, and his groundbreaking research at the University of North Carolina has shown how social media changes adolescent brains, as we just talked about, and how and why these young brains are so incredibly vulnerable. Over there, Larissa May. Larissa is going to, I'll talk about the housekeeping in a moment, but Larissa founded Half the Story. It's a nonprofit organization. It's dedicated to empowering the next generation's leadership with social media, and she's going to share about her own experience as well as how she's trying to make changes in this landscape. Because as we all know, social media is not going away, and young people have to navigate that world. So Larissa is going to talk about that, and we're looking forward. Now, the housekeeping. Why is Larissa not here? And we've got 3 people here. What we're going to do is we're going to start with these 3 panelists, and we're going to talk about these various issues, and then we're going to have Larissa's going to come up. We're going to have a conversation with Larissa about how to move forward and how families can move forward and how young people can move forward. And then, and the part that I think is most important, is all of you will have an opportunity to ask all 4 of our panelists all the questions that you want. We've extended that Q&A period because we think this is so important. So we'll get to that in a little bit. So I'm going to start, Laura, with you. And I just also want to mention, we are going to be showing some very short video clips as well as some imagery. It is disturbing. I was going to say it could be disturbing. It's not could be, it is. So I just want to let everyone know about that ahead of time. And you'll understand why, though, when you see it. So Laura, I'm going to start with you. First of all, thank you, everybody, for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Really, really appreciate it. Laura is extraordinary, and she is one of the people who we are following in this documentary. Laura is the mother of 4 young children, and she left an incredibly high-powered law position. She was a partner at a law firm in Seattle. And I'm going to have her explain why she did that in a second. But she is one of the main lawyers in the Social Media Victims Law Center. We'll talk about what they are doing and how they are trying to hold social media platforms accountable. A very difficult thing to do for something that we're not going to get into too much, but it's something called Section 230, which protects all of these platforms from the videos that are shown or from the content that is shown, because they're not the idea. Well, actually, I'm not going to get into it, Laura, because you're a lawyer. And you're going to do so much.
Allegedly protects them.
Allegedly protects them. Thank you. That's why I'm going to have Laura do it and not me. Laura, let me begin with the fact of the matter is you did leave a very prominent position, and for a lot less money, I'm going to add. What happened?
So my specialty was electronic discovery, and I had a 20-year litigation practice, corner office. Love my firm, but what happens is in January of 2022, a dear friend of mine introduces me to Matt Bergman, our founder, and I read Matt's first 2 complaints. So at that time, SMVLC was 3 people, one being attorney Matt Bergman. I read his first 2 complaints, and as you mentioned, I have 4 small children. I watched the Netflix documentary Social Dilemma, and it took about 1 minute and 30 seconds to turn to my wife and say, they're coming for our kids next. So I called Matt and said, I think you need to give me a job. And I left my firm.
And how did you know about Matt and the work that he was doing?
A colleague of mine had said, look, there's this great plaintiff's attorney who is incredible and has made so much progress in so many fields, and he is insane, and he is starting this firm, funding it from his savings account, because he's a products liability attorney, and he has seen an opportunity to fix products on the front end. So he spent his career representing older individuals who are dying of cancer, right, asbestos exposure. And so Matt saw what happened with Frances Haugen's revelations, the documents that she disclosed, and said, this is my chance to fix these things on the front end. I'm tired of working with a situation that I can't fix. And with my kids, who are my entire world, in every sense of the word, it was a no-brainer for us.
Yes, we have learned that Laura is a tiger parent. That's right. Tiger mom. But Laura, so you left your job, you went and you joined the Social Media Victims Law Center. I think it's important, and again, some of the content, this is where we're going to be showing you some of this content matters. Let's talk about what's going on a little bit, because again, I think we all have this sense that social media is bad, but let's take a look at what is actually happening. And I think, Laura, perhaps before we take a look at the videos, maybe if you could do, because I didn't want to get too much into Section 230, but why are these companies so immune from, and why did you join, allegedly, thank you. I'll get that word. Why are they allegedly immune, and why is it that you had to join a law firm with a different idea about how to get at these companies?
So in 1996, there is the Communication Decency Act, Section 230, which is actually titled the Good Samaritan Law. Right? You had Netscape, I believe, was the largest provider at the time. And for those who remember 1996, I do. I think I was 19, 20 in college and questioning. I was a questioning youth. I was one of these youth that big tech is now saying we want to protect these kids. And we'll get to that in a bit. But so here comes the Good Samaritan Act. And the goal of this is so that these companies can actually do things to protect children. I know they say the 26 words that made the internet. The craziest thing is Section 230 is a lot more than 26 words. Those are the only 26 words anyone ever reads. And so what happens is, for a few years, I think it probably was going okay. Then you have social media companies, and then these technologies that are brand new get developed. Technologies no one could have predicted. And because there's no regulation, no one's watching. Right? This is a black box. They're creating these technologies, they're changing the programming of the algorithms, the whole way it's set up, and they're creating these products, and nobody is watching what's happening. And so I think what you end up with is just over a decade of courts and individuals and consumers just assuming, well, Section 230 applies. Now, Section 230 essentially says these platforms are not responsible for what third parties do on their platform. Right? In a world where these are open bulletin boards, electronic bulletin boards, resources, things like that, where in 1996 these companies didn't know what was going on. They had no way to control, and they were not also pushing these harms. And that's what's happened over a decade.
And that's, I think, something that's really important to understand for those of you who are not like really into TikTok and all of these other places. The imagery, the videos, the content that is being sent out is coming from an algorithm. And Laura, just give a moment on sort of the algorithm sure. 101.
So, and I like to say social media algorithms. It's very specific because someone once told me, look, the order in which you put your clothes on in the morning is an algorithm, right? So when you say an algorithm, it means a lot of things. Now, search engine algorithms, my understanding is that typically those operate by, here's what I want to see. For example, Chinese restaurant. Right? So it's the user input, and then there's some sort of public data points, and you get the result. Here are restaurants near you. What is different about the social media algorithm is that it's being programmed for user engagement. So user engagement plus thousands of private and public data points none of us realize are even being collected, we couldn't even comprehend, equals output. So think about that. One of the examples I use and have seen, and look, we learn more and more. Even just in our practice meeting, I've met with hundreds of children, hundreds of parents, experts, scientists, and we learn more every day. One of the examples an expert had told us is, look, imagine you're a 35-year-old predator and you want to meet children under 16. If we are programming those algorithms for user engagement, well, who is Meta, who is Snapchat, who are they sending you in your user recommendations? They're not sending you 25-year-old women. They're sending you 13, 14, 15-year-old girls. And I've met with hundreds of those young women, and I can tell you that is 100% what's happening, right? It's rewarding predatory behavior because it doesn't care about safety. It doesn't understand right and wrong. It is engagement first.
Right. Well, the algorithm isn't designed for safety, right?
It could be, though.
No, but it's not.
Right.
And I think that's something I have the tendency to do is to anthropomorphize this algorithm. It is a computer program, correct?
It is something that is being driven by programming choices human beings are making intentionally.
Right, exactly. Okay, so let's start, Laura. Let's talk about what's happening on TikTok. And Matt, we've got two videos, but let's talk briefly about Chase and Mason.
So Chase and Mason are two 16-year-old boys. Yeah, there we go. In 2022, Chase Nasca lives in New York, and he is a incredibly successful athlete, loving home, 2 parents, doesn't appear to have any, no reported mental health issues.
Athlete.
No social media addiction as far as anyone can tell. It's a typical teenager, right? He's on TikTok a couple hours a night like every other kid. What happens in February of 2022, he kisses his mom goodbye and says, I'm going to the gym. He goes to the gym. And on his way home from the gym, he stops at an unfenced portion of a train track, and he stands in front of the train and he texts his best friend on Snapchat and says, I can't do it anymore. Now, his parents immediately, as most parents are, clearly something was going on. There's teen mental health. After this happens, his parents at some point get into his TikTok. And what they see in his TikTok is a never-ending string of essentially go kill yourself content, is what I call it. Now, we have pulled as much of that data as we can, and I can tell you that the only search terms I have found thus far in his TikTok are Batman, kitchen hacks, motivational speech. God, there's an athlete of some sort, and I don't know his name.
He's right, exactly.
Right, so this. Now, that's one of our earliest cases where we learned so much by looking at these videos. He had bookmarked over 2,500 videos, and what happens is from December of 2021 until February of 2022, it's pure. In fact, I record from his account occasionally. I have a feed from last night that I'd be happy to show the entire audience when this is done. No searches, just pure go kill yourself content. Chase Naska, in November of 2022, I believe around October, goes through a bad breakup. He's also on TikTok. His parents monitor the phone.
Right. In that case, his parents were aware that he was on social media a lot and tried to take.
They had even taken the phone at the time, right? But like most kids that we interact with, he got another phone. $50, go down to Target, you can get all set up.
You know what, Laura, hold on. Everybody in the back, there's some seats up here in the middle if you want to come have a seat.
So
no pressure either way.
In November, he's searching for, and let's see, so Chase was motivational speech. Mason Edens is inspirational quotes. And he is getting a ton of go kill yourself content via gun. Side note, Chase was getting go stand in front of a train content. And I have images of that in my bag, also happy to share. Mason is getting shoot yourself content, and we have yet to find the search terms that would generate anything like this.
So it's sort of like, for those of you who are, I'll talk about my Instagram account. Sometimes I see things from my friends, but a lot of times I'm getting content about face cream, like non-stop face cream. And I'm using that as anybody else getting face cream? Okay. I'm actually getting neck cream, but that's another topic. But the point of this is that the algorithm knows when you are pausing or when you are looking at it, and Mitch is going to get into some real detail about why that some of this content and how some of this content is designed so that young people with young brains will actually pause on that, because the depressing, well, I'm going to let Mitch explain it because he knows so much more than I do, but we'll talk about that in a second. So what ultimately happens to Mason, then we're going to show that video and we'll move on.
So in November of 2022, and you'll see this is one of Mason's videos from November of 2022, his parents, his mother takes the phone, Jenny takes the phone. She's worried about him. They're trying to get him into counseling. They think he's exhibiting signs of depression at that moment. She takes the phone. Mason leaves the room, and he dies by suicide roughly 5-10 minutes later.
And in the same exact way as the last sets of content was, which was pointing a gun in his mouth. And it's terrible. And the same thing, quite frankly, with Chase.
These are just 2 examples.
Yeah. Matt, do you want to play that video? So this is one of the...
Today, we're going to be exploring the top 10 reasons why I want to...
Over and over and over. So Chase was the first case where I saw data, I talked to a parent, I saw this pattern, and I'm a pattern person. Since then, you have Mason. Since then, I have other children. I have Anna, I have Emma Claire, I have child after child where we get into their content. I'll sometimes talk to a parent who says, my child died by suicide, it was completely random, and they think their kid's on Instagram only, and I say, have you looked for a TikTok, and can we get the data if so?
Right, and I want to emphasize, because this is really important, when Matt and I started making this documentary, we thought, well, maybe the parents are understandably so distraught that they think or say that this is what was on there. We went through all of these feeds with Laura. they were not looking for these things. And that is so important in this unfolding story. All right, England Roberts and Instagram. Give us a brief on that, and we're going to show that video.
It's a tough one. That was one of the first that I really got to know England. So England was 14. In September of 2019, among other things that is happening, you have on Instagram, and I meet a lot of young kids who say, hey, I get these horrible self-harm recommendations, like pages from Instagram. They have pages out there where adults will pay children to send pictures of self-mutilation. And I get children telling me I wasn't looking for these things. These are the things that Meta was recommending. In England's case, you have a beautiful young woman, big family, she's the baby, right? Center of attention. Again, no mental health issues, no reported, no signs, no symptoms. September of 2019, one of these types of pages that we'll see a video in a moment that is recommended is a woman choking herself with an extension cord. Now, before we see the video, a little bit of background here is in September 2020, England dies the same way as is depicted in the video, after spending about a week in the hospital with her family beside her before they had to make that difficult decision. In 2023, July, I believe, Meta finally takes the particular video that was in
Well, you know what,
England's-
Laura, let's show the video,
Okay.
and then we'll
Sure.
talk about that.
Sure.
Please stop this madness. What do you want from me? What do you want? Please! Please stop this madness.
So
What do you
that's
want from me? What do you...
that's the video. And is it down from Instagram, Laura?
In July of 2023, after who knows how many reports, the particular video that England and her friends were passing around, because kids are coming to think this is normal and funny and haha, they don't know how else to respond, it comes down. So Tony, her father, in January of 2024 checked, and there's about 20 of these videos back up, and all the names are similar. It's Peaches this, Peachy that. I asked Tony actually right before, and I think, 3 days ago, I asked him not to check, of course, because it's traumatic, but he did, and he said they're all still up.
All right, we're going to move Amy. You okay?
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, let's start with tell us about Alexander Neville.
Sure. Alex was our adventuresome kiddo. He was super intelligent. He loved to try new things. Early in life, starting about 3 years old, he was an Egyptologist. He learned everything about Egyptology and would go, I know what you're thinking. He's so cute. And you're right. But he loved to teach people about Egyptology. And then it moved into Civil War and World War II. He really thought that one day he might be a historian when he grew up. His goal was to go to George Washington University and work at the Smithsonian. That was his little life goal that he had at that point. He skateboarded, played video games, all the things that a typical 14-year-old would do. One thing that he did that might be a little different is he had his own little eBay business going on, and that's a scouting picture there. That was one of the last really cool things he got to do before he passed away, was he went on a sailing trip with his dad with his Boy Scout troop. Alex loved Scouts. Not so much the merit badge side of things. The adventure side of things was great. Merit badges felt too much like school, and Alexander's relationship with school was rocky at best. He's that kiddo that could pass all the tests, and then be like, why do I have to do homework? This is dumb. This doesn't make any sense. And I can't disagree with that kind of analysis there, but so it was tough getting to do homework and things like that. But anyway, he had an eBay business where he was selling off his childhood toys, and which was hard on me because he's growing up, he's trying to assert his independence and become an individual, and he was good at it. He was very organized. He organized his account. He went off every day and delivered his eBay packages, and he was great at that. But like I said, yeah.
Amy, were you aware about his social media use?
So Alex was not heavy on Snapchat until the pandemic started, and we let him be. We had rules around these things. Like for Alex to have a phone and social media, we could check it anytime we wanted to. And he agreed. And we had all the passwords, and he reluctantly, would give it to us all the time. But I would just scroll through, check for things. I didn't know about the drug emoji code. No one was talking about it at the time. No one was actually talking about fentanyl back in 2020 either. So we were not operating with all the information. We thought we had the guardrails in place, and learned that we did not after Alex passed away.
And Alex came to you and said,
So Alex had this funky few days in June of 2020 where I was like, okay, dude, like, what is up? Are you using something? I want to take you to the doctor. And he's like, no, I'm fine. I was up late, ate something bad. Of course, 14's a height of puberty. So the moodiness was totally on par with his personality. But he came back to us about a day and a half later and was like, okay, I got to talk to you guys. We sat down. It was late on a Sunday night. We sat down at the kitchen table, and he said, I got to tell you. He told us three key things. He told us a lot that night, but 3 key things came out of that conversation. And one was, I wanted to experiment with Oxy. I got it from a dealer on Snapchat. It has a hold on me, and I don't know why. And so we did what anybody would do. That following morning, I called a treatment place. They needed to call me back with their recommendations. That night, he died. Like, they literally called me back 4 minutes after his time of death.
and I want to, and Amy, thank you again. I know that we said it earlier, but thank you for the bravery with which you share this story. Because, Matt, let's put up the image of what what happens on Snapchat, not just to Alex Neville, but that happens. Laura, how often will this kind of content?
So we don't have the stats. I will say that we work with over 150 of these children who've died. I also work with numerous who survived. And in talking to them, and frankly, they'd love to speak with all of you as well and tell you what their experience is, because over and over, as I met with these kids, it's the same story. I was 12. I opened a Snapchat because my teacher, my friend, my coach showed me the funny filters. My class uses it. My friends use it. I wanted to chat with them. It looked fun. It looked harmless. And then they say, within minutes to days, Snapchat began sending me quick ads for drug dealers called plugs. I started getting recommended drug content in my feed. Usually it starts with marijuana and vaping, and then it typically progresses into pills. These are children, the ones that have survived, who have told me the same story, not in the same room, separately, children who've never met each other over and over. And I've talked to other children, friends of, kids of friends, neighbors who say, ask your kids, don't ask them, do you like Snapchat? Ask them, has Snap ever recommended a plug to you? And
a plug is, again, is a drug dealer. Amy, the other thing that's important to understand when it comes to Snap is that a young person is incentivized to have lots of friends. And Amy, how do the drug dealers, to the best of your knowledge, infiltrate into these feeds?
So my understanding, especially back in 2020, a lot of times they would come up in these quick ads. And so you could quick add these complete strangers, or they maybe your friend is a friend of theirs now, and so they request you, and now you can become friends with them because you feel like your friend's friends with them, so it seems like you should be able to trust somebody. And so then once one dealer's in your friend group, a bunch of them start to show up, and more can infiltrate that way.
But also it's the gamification, right? So Snap is somewhat unique in that you get a score. It's a how popular am I? What's my Snap score? So every time I snap someone, I get a score. You get a Snap map. The more people on my Snap map, the more popular I am. You get streaks, right? So I talked to a lot of kids who are like, I added everyone Snap recommended because I wanted to be liked. I wanted to be popular. Snap said these were my friends. They said I've seen the messages. We've opened accounts. It says you may know these people.
Yeah, and these streaks, these kids think it's fun at first, but so I do listening sessions with teens all across the country. And one thing that comes up about these streaks over and over again is like, they're fun at first, but then they start to cause me a little bit of anxiety. And I have this compulsion now that I have to go keep my Snap streak going. And I always ask them, like, what's the worst that's going to happen if you let it go? And they're like, people won't like me. I won't be popular. Like, it's really messed with their heads, and it's very scary.
Which is, Mitch, I think a perfect segue to you. Snap streaks. Right, all of these things where it seems like you are incented to have lots of friends and to be popular. But I think, Mitch, the question that I would ask was, we've just had like a little bit of a sense of what is going on. Why are young brains vulnerable to this?
Well, let me take you back for a moment, to a world in the 1900s before we had social media, before we had this. Of course, we all know that the adolescent body changes at the adolescent transition. What a lot of us don't recognize is that it's about a year or two before you see changes in the body that the brain has started to make substantial changes. But the brain changes region by region, right? If you're a parent, you know that at 10 or 11, the first region is the eye-rolling region, right? And the reason why that's happening is because there is a massive increase in neurotransmitter receptors for oxytocin and dopamine, right? So this is when kids are all about who's hanging out with whom and who's cool and who sits at what table. And they are very, very much supercharged to be socially sensitive to how much they are well-liked, how much they get positive attention. This is a normal developmental phenomenon. What age? This is around 10, 11, 12 that we start to see this hypersensitivity to these areas. Now, what's important is that the last region to develop is the prefrontal cortex, which, as many of you know, is kind of the brain's brakes. It says whatever you're thinking is so important that you want to do, you have a craving, you have a drive, you have an instinct for, maybe you shouldn't do it right away. Maybe you should stop and control those impulses. So that means we have a developmental window from about 10 to 25, where kids are very interested in social feedback. Well, in the 1900s, you went home from school, there was a natural stopping point for that social interaction. You called someone up on the phone, you got what we called a busy signal, right? And that was the end of it. That was the end of your social interaction, unless you went out of your way to meet them in the neighborhood. Social media has changed all of this in fundamental ways because those changes in the brain are occurring to make us interested in gradual autonomy from our parents and to develop more intimate and complex relationships with peers. What's happening now is that we have a system where you can press a bar 24/7 to get likes, feedback, streaks, counts of followers. And what may or may not have been intended initially has now created a situation where kids are biologically primed to try and get that kind of social feedback constantly. And they don't have yet the brain's ability to stop themselves. So if these ideas about brain and neurology are correct, we would expect to see that kids are unable to stop themselves using these devices. Well, in fact, that's exactly what the research is showing. 50% of kids are reporting at least one symptom of diagnostic clinical dependency on social media. What I mean is that you take the diagnostic criteria for cocaine addiction, you take out the word for cocaine, you put in the word social media, and you ask them about the diagnostic criteria. 50% of kids are saying they can't quit, they have withdrawal symptoms, tolerance symptoms when they're off of it. That's the level of mismatch between normal brain development and the world that social media has created.
Mitch, I'm curious, can you tell everybody, obviously you're looking at this in a different way than Laura and have obviously experienced a different experience than Amy. What are you seeing? You are on the front lines of this in terms of dealing with young people.
So I'm wearing two hats. At UNC Chapel Hill, we are a research lab that studies this with thousands of kids. We're one of the only labs that does not take money from social media companies to do this research. So we are doing the work to expose whatever may come up. And it might say that there are some benefits to social media use for some kids. And in some cases there are. But we are also able to say, without hesitation, exactly what we're finding that's concerning. Here are my biggest concerns as a researcher. The extent to which social media is interfering with sleep is critical. Adolescents that are not getting 8 to 9 hours of sleep, and meta-analyses show that social media use is the #1 reason why, are growing brains that are smaller in size. That interruption of sleep is disrupting brain size and brain function. We also have done research to look at what happens when you're a very active user in 6th grade. It changes how the brain grows in 7th through 9th grade. And we do that with imaging. We have kids go into an fMRI, and we look at how their brains are actually adapting and evolving over year on year. And it's changing. We have about half of kids are reporting that they are seeing the exact content that you all are talking about. Content that teaches them how to cut themselves and hide that from their parents. Content that teaches them how to engage in anorexia-like behaviors, and an incredible amount of cyber hate, discrimination against so many different groups based on their individual identities.
So Mitch, I was going to ask you this later, but while we're here, what is it? Obviously, people are incredibly concerned, and what makes this even more complicated is that parents are often so much worse at knowing how to navigate any of this, right? Their phones, social media, et cetera. What is the piece of wisdom that you feel everybody needs to know here, and how can they help a child they love or their own child or somebody they interface with?
One, call your representatives at Congress, the Senate, and the House, and your state. And at the federal level, pass COSA now. We have 70 senators who have already signed on. Put it up, vote, let's go. Do that at the state level as well. You cannot, kids, we don't have such a thing as
We'll talk about COSA in a moment.
Sure. We don't have kids' use of scrolling social media in the classroom. No, you can't multitask. There's task shifting. Kids' brains are not equipped for task shifting. Get these phones, buy them a starter phone, a flip phone. They still sell them if you want to have connection with your kids, but get them out of the classroom. So at a policy level, at an individual level, as parents, get all those phones, yours included, on top of the fridge starting at 9 to 10 o'clock at night, period. We must have it. Used to be rude to call someone after 10 o'clock. What happened to that? Right? Shut it down. Shut it down. Sleep is so important.
I'm going to go further and say put them in a box and lock it, because many of our children would sneak out, go into their parents' bedroom even, and pull the device off at night for years. So put them in a lockbox. Top of the fridge isn't going to do it.
Tell your school that they need to be teaching digital media literacy. We teach them how to drive a car, and we test their ability to do so before we give them the keys. Teach them how to live in a world with social media and to recognize the difference between bots and real accounts, and et cetera, et cetera. We have a whole curriculum for that.
And Larissa May is also going to be able to get into some of this as well. I want to just, before we segue to Larissa May, Laura, I want to come back to you because what you just said about the England Roberts, the hanging video that was on Instagram that's still up there, not the same one.
It's the same one, different accounts, same exact video.
Okay.
It probably even has the same metadata on the back end that companies like Meta could easily track it and dump it.
But surely you have spoken with the social media platforms and told them what's going on and asked them to take
I've told them about 360 times. That's the number of complaints I filed. In detail.
And how do they respond?
So initially there were general denials. In October of 2023 in the MDL, which is the federal mass tort litigation, the current response, the court said to the attorneys for these companies, you represent billion-dollar companies, what duties do they have to these are almost verbatim, what duties do they have to these children? What duties do they have to design their platforms in a safe way? And the exact answer verbatim was no such duty exists under the law. And the judge actually said, hold on, let me write that down. That's the position you're taking. These companies, look, I'm not going to put it gently, these companies, in at least some instances, I'm going to say many, but at least some are killing children. They know it. Sean Parker in 2017 actually said we designed these, first Meta president, Facebook, we designed these products to give dopamine hits. There are meta documents with pictures of the brain, meta marketing planning documents that are public. I'll only reference public documents. Right. Pictures of the brain that says the temporal lobe does not develop until around age 24, which means these kids are particularly vulnerable. Here are the 20 product changes we can make to bring them in. So it's, and I lost my train of thought.
No, that's okay. And
so
Mitch,
horrible.
I want to jump back to you for a second because you testified at the Senate hearing this past January. Many of you have probably seen footage from that hearing where all the various heads of the different platforms were there, including Mark Zuckerberg, et cetera. What was the gist of what you had to say, and did you get any response?
So there's some very interesting double talk that's happening that's important to be aware of. There's a long time ago, people started being interested in the effects on mental health, and what they did was studies on the number of minutes that kids were spending online. And in fact, the truth is, there is very little evidence that the number of minutes that kids spend online is related to their mental health outcome, because minutes is such a sloppy measure. It's like saying, how many calories did you have today? Well, it depends. Was it candy or was it vegetables, right? So if your child is reading the New York Times and talking with their friends about it on social media, that's probably okay. I don't know any kids that do that, but if they were, that would be okay. The CEOs are now leveraging those old studies to say, oh, there's no relationship between social media time spent and mental health. What they are blatantly ignoring and avoiding, and we have published in our health advisories at the American Psychological Association, is the exact content, features, and functions that are indeed directly associated with negative development in kids' brains, their social and their psychological experiences, and that data is unimpeachable.
Amy, same question for you. Did you have any interaction with SNAP?
I originally did not. I thought it was a weird one-off situation until I started meeting an abundance of families who had their kids had met the same fate. And then we had a first meeting with Snapchat was in spring of 2021 with a couple of executives. And long story short, they were so sorry for your loss, we had no idea this was a problem. And that's when
But you can't sue us.
Oh, and you can't, they also told us in that conversation, you can't sue us. And that's when my shift changed, and I was like, okay, we're going to do something about this, because I was kind of in the thought that if we go to Snap and talk to them about the problem, surely they're going to fix it. I learned how naive I am, and we've moved on and taken more aggressive actions, like our lawsuit, several protests in front of Snapchat, a recent article in Rolling Stone magazine, and we're just going to keep at it until we get the change that we're seeking.
Okay, so the last question before we switch over to Larissa May, and then remember, all four will be back at the conclusion, and you'll have an opportunity to ask lots of questions. The lawsuit. So Laura, so we ascertain that the way that you're approaching it is different than the Section 230. Well, why don't you tell us where are things with
It's not third-party speech. Look, when a company is programming a product to connect predators to children, to send, to addict them with streaks, to get them dopamine hits, it's not third-party speech, which is what those documents in late 2021 gave us just a glimpse of. And for folks who haven't, go look for those meta documents, because there are things in there that will change your perspective entirely. So the argument is, and we have various courts, these are products. Even if they're not products, this is not third-party speech. And in some cases, the streaks, the Bitmojis, these companies are, it's their own speech, right? It's their own, and so we have to hold them accountable at the same level as we would every other industry. And so we're trying to make change by saying, 230 has been taken too far. That's not what it was intended for. If you haven't read 230, read it. It's more than 26 words. And the other words are interesting because they actually talk about user control and protecting children and giving parents access to providers who can help them put software on that will protect their kids from harmful stuff. That's in Section 230, the same law they're using to say, you can't touch us.
And you are a sort of I don't know, how would you describe the Social Media Victims Law Center? It's a lot of different lawyers who sort of came together.
There's 5 of us currently, and we're actually over 2,600 clients. I think the 2,500 number was probably a month or two old.
How are you making any progress? Because you were told by the attorneys from the platforms that nothing you can do here.
Everyone said this is a losing battle, don't do it, try to talk Matt out of it. And he said this isn't, particularly with the fentanyl cases, they said don't do it. This isn't about, it's a moral imperative, were Matt's exact words. We have to do this. And as a parent, look, I'm here because of my kids. I'd like to think I'd be here if I didn't have little children, but I will do anything to protect those kids, as will Amy, as will the hundreds of parents who've lost their children that we work with every day. It's a moral imperative.
Are you making any progress with the suit?
Let me take a side from the suit. Just here today, if just one of you who has a child you care about looks into this and steps up and questions these companies and calls your representatives, if just one of you in this audience, then it's worth all of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Laura Marquez Garrett, Amy Neville, Dr. Mitch Prinstein. We're going to shift, and we're going to welcome Larissa May up here, and then don't go anywhere. And speaking of don't going anywhere, there's still some seats up here for those of you standing in the back. If you'd like to have a seat, come join us.
Woohoo!
You know what? While we're doing the transition, Matt, can we put up the slide about the 46-year-old feed versus the 20?
If I may, this is a Snapchat account. This is their Discover feature, which they claim to curate. This is basically not even third-party stuff. This is stuff Snap says. Sorry, we curate this. So these first two, this is the Discover feed for a self-identified 46-year-old female on Snapchat. Doesn't use the account, no searches. We opened a test account. We self-identified as a 14-year-old boy. No searches, brand new account. There's Discover from Snapchat for a 14-year-old boy, 46-year-old woman. This is misogyny. This is how radicalization starts. This is a 14-year-old boy. This is what our children are seeing. So what everyone here had social media. I meet with moms and kids, and the kid sees their parents' Facebook or Instagram for the first time and says, what is that? Where are the sex ads? That happened. A 16-year-old said, where are the sex ads? Is that really what Facebook looks like? It's a different product.
Okay, thank you, Laura. Larissa May, founder and executive director of Half the Story. It's a nonprofit dedicated to empowering the next generation's healthy relationship with social media. Larissa, thank you for being here.
Thank you. I can hardly believe that there's a stage dedicated to this after 10 years of doing
Seriously?
this work. Yeah.
Thank you for being here. And I also want to say, you've had your own challenges, and I so appreciate that you're taking the time and the bravery to share your story. So thank you. Tell us a little bit about how you got into this.
Well, I'm here today because I'm alive, and it starts as simple as that. I am a survivor of the digital world. I grew up in the first generation to go to college and receive social media and have to navigate the emotional and social turmoil without any guidebook. And like many young girls, I was struggling with body image. I already was predisposed to deal with depression and anxiety. And when I got on social media and Instagram, it was like a magnifying glass. I pulled up my feed, and it told me that I should die and that I should be skinnier, and I believed that more than anyone that actually loved me. And it came to the point where my social media became my sword, it became my shield, and I lost everything in my life. My friends, going to class, and I almost ended my life. And I was lucky to have an RA that was a med student and took me to the center on campus. And in my healing process, I had my light bulb moment, the most important idea of my life, which was the idea that technology was going to be the biggest determinant of our future and our young children's health. And my doctors weren't asking me about it. They asked me about drugs, sex, alcohol, socialization, and sleep. But how about the place that I was spending 10 to 12 hours a day, and the average American teen will spend 30 years of their life? And that was where Half the Story began, in my dorm room 10 years ago. And it is the privilege of a lifetime to not only be here and be alive and fight for this so that you don't have to lose your kids and your grandkids, but because I get to work with teens every day that are also changing this narrative. And there is hope, because we're all here in this room.
Larissa, how did you turn it? And actually, let's put just a little bit more to 10 to 12 hours. I'm sure for a lot of people here, they're like, how is that possible? Like, explain what was going on in those 10 to 12 hours, and then how did you see the light and make a shift?
Well, I was living in sickness and digital sickness. And for many kids today, when we give them a device, they don't have the emotional coping skills, as Mitch was talking about, because we're adding a device into one of the most vulnerable periods of their life, which is the perfect neurobiological storm. And so for me, we say digital wellness is an inside job. Yes, it's about the devices, but it's even more about what is going inside your child's mind, inside their heart. And for me, I didn't know how to deal with hard emotions. I didn't know how to deal with not fitting in. So I went to my device because it gave me that false sense of connection and community that lasted a minute, but that hit made me keep coming back.
That's the dopamine hit
that was the dopamine
about, right?
hit, and it was something that I could no longer control. And I was running away from my emotions, and I was numbing out. And to be frank, most of the time our kids are behind their screens is not even because they really want to be there, but because they're escaping an emotion they don't know how to cope with.
You know, it's interesting. I look as an older person at what's going on, and I think about if I was a young girl, and I don't just know like the tip of the iceberg on this. You see maps where you see all your girlfriends. You are encouraged to get lots of friends. It becomes competitive. What is it like as a young person to be navigating in the, I mean, when I was growing up, it was like, how many people called you a night? You know, this is so much more, it's like it's on steroids.
It's on steroids, and I also want to acknowledge that in this moment, everything is changing with AI. And we have to acknowledge that because we have gone from what was a mean comment and a bad photo to now losing likeness, losing your own image. boys and girls making videos. Any of you could take a video of me today and have me say something that I didn't and put it on the internet and end my career tomorrow. And that's the reality the world our kids are growing up in, is that they don't have a safety net. They can't make mistakes in the way that you could, because if they press the wrong button or they say the wrong thing, their life could be over. They could take a pill. And the truth is that they're all kids. They're curious. When they're in middle school, they want to play. We say, kids, what do you want to do on their phone? They say, well, I want to ding-dong ditch, and I want to call people on Craigslist, and I want to see what I can do with this thing. And that is where the mentality starts in middle school. And where it goes to when they don't have the digital wellness skills and the emotional resilience skills and the digital literacy skills and the combination of those two things, that's what leads to the crisis that we're dealing with.
You know, I also want to, you mentioned body image and body dysmorphia. This is a real problem. Can you talk a little bit about this? I just think it's important for people to understand like what's happening.
Yeah.
We didn't really touch that.
Well, first and foremost, I think there's a lot of conversation in the media about young women, but as someone that also works with young men, I firmly believe we need to be talking a lot more about male body image. And so a lot of the data and a lot of the storytelling has been about young girls. And 1 in 3 girls that goes on a social media platform leaves feeling worse about their body. At Half the Story, we're actually partnering with Girls Inc., which is one of the oldest, largest national organizations, to take our programming, refine it, and scale it to all of their girls, to give them the skills that they need, because also girls and boys that come from high opportunity communities are also more likely to deal with the negative challenges associated with tech, because they're less likely to have emotional support, mental health support within their communities, their families, and their ecosystems. And for young girls today, it is like waking up and looking at yourself in the mirror for 8 hours a day and never feeling like you will amount to anything worth living for. And that was what happened to me, and is why I almost killed myself. And that is not a unique story. I talk to girls, I talk to parents, we just heard the other panel, there's so many dangers, but when you see and you experience a young child who chooses to take their life, because they're receiving content of how to kill yourself, which is what I saw, how to lose 10 pounds in a week, how to do all of these things, you start doing whatever you can do to feel like you're in control until you're not.
Larissa, tell us how you sort of pulled out. I know you mentioned an RA.
Yeah.
And how did Half the Story evolve?
Yeah. Well,
and why do we need it? It's a lot of questions.
well,
I'm sorry.
the first thing I'll say is that I've devoted the last 10 years of my life, I've given everything in my life, social, emotional, financial safety, everything, to be in this moment, to keep this mission alive. Because for many years, the first 5 years of this work, people looked at me and thought that I was crazy. And they did not understand my story, and they did not see the connection between mental health and technology. And initially, why I wanted to start Half the Story, which most entrepreneurs that you talk to be an entrepreneur, as wild and challenging as it is, you have to build something oftentimes that you need for yourself, that you're willing to give everything in your life for. And for me, I saw as a young person, I did not have a safety net. I have zero skills in the healthcare setting or the educational setting to set me up for success. So what I decided was, it started with a $250 grant in my dorm room. And what I did is I spent every day for 3 years interviewing young people all around the world. This was before AI, going on Google Translator, trying to understand, what is the other side of the social media coin? Is it impacting you? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it both? And I realized that this was not only a generational issue, but a global issue, and that this had to be a global priority. So I bootstrapped it, and during the pandemic, when the world shut down, thousands of schools started reaching out to me and government partners and entities and said, we want an intervention-based programming rooted in play, creativity, imagination that puts kids at the core. And what I had was a community of thousands of teens, and I went out and found the best educators and researchers that I could, and I put them all in a room, and we play tested. And we took the fear out of the digital world, and we brought back the fun, and we made the kids the player in the game so that they could design their own habits and their own systems for the future. And so that's Half the Story now. We have a scalable program, Social Media U, and we're working with federal governments in different states. We're working with organizations like Girls Inc., and massive educational partnerships, which I can't say who yet, and our goal is to impact at least 50 million students over the next 10 years in our work. And why this is so critical is because we teach kids sex ed. We teach them how to drive. Yet we throw them in schools, we take their phones, we give them iPads, and we say, figure it out. And we have to, when AI strips everything of humanity, writing, reading from us, we have to preserve the child, the inner child, the imagination and innovation. And that is the heart of what social media does. Mental health, emotional resilience skills, and digital habits together from middle school all the way through high school. And then we train kids this summer. We have a civics academy, and we train kids to make change in their own world, to go into tech platforms, to yell at them, to tell the stories that we all heard today, and to make a difference. Because there's only one of me, but I need 10 million me's. And I'm on a mission to train them, because when we put kids in the room, things change.
Something that is interesting to me, if you develop an alcohol problem, you can, if you're able to, stop drinking.
Yes.
If you develop a drug problem, you can, if you're lucky enough, be able to stop and just stop taking drugs. Food's more complicated, we won't go there. However, as a young person, even as an older person, it's really hard to navigate your worlds without interfacing with this content, with social media. And what I thought was so interesting about what you're doing, Larissa, is you're helping young people understand that there are things that you can do so you can live with social media in spite of what's going on. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. So first and foremost, technology is a social determinant of health. We have to start looking at digital wellness as a part of the digital equity equation. We cannot continue to scale internet access and broadband while scaling the harms. And working with the most opportunity, the communities with the most opportunity around the world that are oftentimes left behind, it's so important to emphasize that. Because unlike alcohol, unlike a drug, our kids use technology every day for emotional, social, academic, and economic advancement. And we cannot just say that all technology is bad and then say you need to take your ACT test or your ACT prep class on this device. So my approach is much more through the lens of, let's think of technology more as food. Your relationship with food is different based on where you come from, how much money you have, what the modeling was in your life, and also the emotional state that you're experiencing. Digital wellness is a spectrum and a journey. If we can get kids to go from states of passive digital sickness into active technology consumption by giving them mindful modifications while also making greater systems change, which we'll talk about next, we can and will see digital flourishing, which is the outcome that we are aiming for not only in our program in schools, but which is why we're now partnering with states to bring this on state national levels to actually change the way that we not only educate kids, but empower them and also measure those outcomes. Because without data and without science, we could pass any policy, we can educate kids with any curriculum we want to spin out, but it has to be rooted in data. And I believe in science over anything. I will surround myself by scientists for the rest of my life and whatever I build, because they are the minds that we need when we think about systems change in the next 100 years of human evolution.
All right, last question before we bring everybody else back and we open it up to your questions, because you're probably tired of my questions at this point. But what is here we are at the Ideas Festival. What's the big idea that everyone here needs to know?
Well, my big idea is to make digital wellness a global priority. And what that looks like is a trifurcated approach. One, making education a priority. Knowledge is power for kids. We don't have time or money to waste. Kids are getting tech every day. Let's get social media into every school around the world. Social media you at half the story. Come find me afterwards. I'm even going to the Aspen School District today because I met the superintendent.
Oh, good for you.
And I'm going to run there and I'm going to make it happen here. So come find me, because what we're building is scalable and we can bring it to you. The second is we need systems change. Let's look at climate change. Climate change. What did we do to get big companies on board to make changes? We created some sort of economic incentive. We need to have broad sweeping policies like COSA. We cannot rely on individual states because a kid in California is not more valuable than a kid in Arkansas. And that is the truth. So what does it look like to have tax cuts if you're investing in mental health and you're making these changes? To be honest, I think that that's what would move this a lot faster. And the last piece would be healthcare and systems change. I haven't actually shared this yet, but I'm actually working on a revolutionary technology solution that's integrating in shifting from surveillance to support and emotional health that is going to change the way that we treat this within healthcare systems with young people at the core. And so for any of you that are interested in being a part of this future, we're finalizing our round, and our goal is to make digital wellness the new wellness for the world. So I'm so grateful, and it takes a whole team, and it also takes all of the incredible people you heard before me. This is a village, this is a movement, and this is something that every single person in this room can get behind by just talking to your kids and making one small change. So thank you.
Larissa, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Okay, we have one mic, apparently, is that correct? Yes. All right, let's start. Who's got the mic? And we do need to record these questions.
Carrie, can I say one thing
Yes,
before,
of course.
just to sort of frame? One thing that is sort of, I think we skirt around a lot, social media is not the internet. And we mix those up all the time. And for example, I hear these companies say, oh, we think 20% of kids get some benefit. We weren't running those tests in 1999 because children weren't dying at record rates.
Yeah.
Right? The internet, I was there when the internet came about. It made me happier. It gave me connections. It gave me resources. It gave me friends in Canada that I never would have met. And so I guess I would just say when we talk about these issues, social media is not something our kids need. It's here, and I get that, but we just need to remember it's not the internet. And quite frankly, I don't know what social media has brought to kids that the internet did not. It's great for influencers, it's great for small companies, it's great for big business. What about kids?
I can say we actually have no psychological data to indicate that kids who stay off of social media suffer any consequences.
Right. Yep.
In fact, there's now data to indicate that some of the most popular and well-adjusted kids are the ones staying off of social media.
Yep.
So 99% of parents tell you the only reason why they gave their kids access is because they didn't want their kid to be the only one that was off. So we in our center at UNC are trying to get the message out as much as 3 people can, to let people know this is the actual science, and don't be fooled by that group think that you're the only one that's going to keep your kid off.
Before we go to questions, who would like to talk about what is COSA? Because that was brought up.
Yes, COSA is the Kids Online Safety Act. It is a very critical piece of legislation. I think, Mitch, you mentioned earlier, we have 70 senators who want this to go to a vote. Mm-hmm. If you know anyone in DC who can help, please reach out to them. It's a complicated question, right? But it is meant to provide regulation. It includes things like disclosure requirements for these companies, reporting requirements, duties of care, as well as specific, hey, your features need to be set to safe settings by default for children. Things like we do, there should be some ability to parental monitor for kids under 18, but you have to tell everyone, and the parents still don't get to see what the kid's doing, just simply who are they connected with. A bunch of things, right? And so it's really critical that we have something here. Every year we go and look. I know tech companies say, oh, but I'm sure there's something we could do better. Well, they've been saying that for years. And every year we wait. This is billions these companies are making, and thousands of children who are dying every year.
And also, we just have to acknowledge they've made $8 billion off of minors in the last year, just from advertising dollars, minors. And on top of that, the last national legislation that had anything to do with safety in the internet was not passed since the 90s, okay? Social media is over 20 years old at this point. If we do not pass this now, we're already gonna be another 10 years behind, because AI is moving faster than the legislation has for social media.
Yep. And also, how is it possible that something like 70, 80+% of our country and our senators want COSA to go forward, and we're still fighting every single day just to make one little step?
Yeah.
Well, we know the answer to that.
Yes, we do.
Okay, let's take some questions. Yes, in the white dress. And I want to just say, because there's going to be a lot of people who want to ask questions, would prefer if we sort of stay towards questions, make them concise, and we know a lot of people have a lot of opinions, but we really do want to make sure we can get to as many questions as possible. Thank you.
No problem. My question isn't even, my child is 9, not even to social media. And he sent me a note last night because we've talked about addiction. I showed him a video of him screaming and yelling when he couldn't have his iPad. And he sent me a note last night and he said, Mommy, I need help. What do we do with these kids? He has, he's predisposed to emotional and mental health issues. What do we do with kids that age that are going to be these children, and we need to stop them now.
His
So what
his iPad's targeting him. Side note, I've weaned my own children off their tablets and also YouTube Kids after starting this work and seeing and hearing from parents. My 5-year-old, it took me almost a month to get her off YouTube Kids. Now they're allowed Disney, they're allowed some Netflix, 30 minutes a day for my children on screen time when I started this work. It took us a month to wean my 5-year-olds off of YouTube Kids. They don't react the same way. Tablets, it took us easily a month to wean them off tablets.
Thank you.
So
for
here's
that.
what you can do.
Mitch, would you,
I will say there are some things that you can do, and we're doing this both at the American Psychological Association and also through our center. But it's about teaching kids when they're in middle school how to understand social media and their devices as a tool. And one way and I work with my own kids' school district on this a lot, but one thing that we do is we introduce them to the Apple Store and we show them the privacy section of the Apple Store. And we say, look, this weather app or this app for a game, it's taking the data from all your other apps and it's selling it. And they say, wait a minute, what, do I make that money? We say, no, you absolutely do not make that money. And they say, but wait a minute, it's a weather app. I thought it's just supposed to give me the weather. And we start to explain to them, people haven't made social media just to be friendly and nice to kids. They've done it to make a profit.
Right.
And help them to understand that they're using it at the expense of their data for someone else to make money. And help them understand that what they're being pulled to do is for reasons that are not immediately evident. And once they have a sense of efficacy and how to use it as a tool, it changes their way of thinking about it. Anyway, lots to say there, but I'll stop.
Come find me after. Would love to talk to you. Yeah.
And if you also, thank you for sharing that. If you would state your name, that would also be useful if you want. You don't have to. Yes, in the back. Yes.
Hi, I'm an educator. I'm a longtime administrator, and I just want to say that this isn't starting in middle school. It is starting in 4th grade. Mm-hmm. It is starting in 3rd grade. Mm-hmm. It is starting in second. And I can also say that the biggest challenge that I have as an administrator working with parents is while parents believe that they are putting guidelines up, they themselves are modeling behavior that their children are replicating.
That's right.
And so that is the challenge, in addition to all of these other pieces. So we're saying the young brain and we're saying the brain of children. We're not mentioning the dopamine hit that we as adults receive and the joy that we get, myself included, from being on social media. And our children are watching. And so it's really difficult to say to your child, you shouldn't be doing this while you have your hand on your phone and you yourself are scrolling Instagram.
So I think that's
a big question. How do we educate the parents beyond the language that this is only an issue for adolescents? It's an issue for young children, and it's an issue for us as adults.
Well, I would add to that also, and Mitch, I'm going to ask this of you. Adults are modeling this behavior. How does that fit into this equation?
So you're exactly right. This is some of the science that we're trying to do with our center. Our center was very generously built by pilot funds from a donor. Those pilot funds are about to end, so hopefully we can continue this work. But we're trying to demonstrate exactly what parent behaviors can be helpful versus not so we can educate parents directly. Mm-hmm. We're doing talks from our center all around the country, and what we find is really critical is for what you just did to happen, is that for us to talk about kids and for parents to become self-aware that their behavior is doing this. Because if we get up and we start telling parents, you've done a bad job, you're doing the wrong thing, they're so overwhelmed right now with blame and feeling helpless that it actually seems to make them feel like, oh no, you're telling me that I'm a bad parent. So, but I will say 100% of the time, someone stands up and says, gee, I think some of this is applying to me too as a parent, and I think we need to do this as a family. Mm-hmm. And we say, yes, exactly.
And the one thing I always tell parents, I've been doing elementary school presentations more recently, and like in kindergarten, I always ask kids who go to bed with a device, and it's like half the class, kindergarten all the way through.
Wait, in kindergarten?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They're going to bed with a device. So I kind of challenge those kiddos, go back to your parents and be like, hey, will you read me a bedtime story tonight? And try to bring it back to that bedtime story is a good starting point to parents to recognize what's happening.
I want to play a little devil's advocate too. So those, who have kids, how many parents in this room have ever had a glass of wine at dinner in front of their children? Right? Right? And so the difference, this is a Trojan horse, essentially, right? They put these devices in our kids' hands. They said these are safe. These will connect your children. They're needed for education. They're entertaining, all of these things. We don't then see it for that, right? I've had alcohol and I've drank beer in front of my children. And ultimately, the difference is recognizing how are these programming decisions harming our kids, but also even that addictive piece, all of these features that we're talking about, the speed of the algorithm, what they're putting in front of adults, it's also giving dopamine hits, right? So instead of saying, hey, parents, maybe ignore your own addiction, we say, hey, companies, maybe make those company-side changes that you can make to make your products less deliberately addictive so that everyone can put their phone down.
Sorry.
Hi.
Yes.
Perfect. Hi. Just a couple questions. No one's mentioned YouTube really on stage, and I'm assuming YouTube's included in all of this?
Yes.
Okay, just wanted to verify that. The digital detox, you can also take your phone away, put it away, but then you go and your kids are doing their homework on their computer, and it's YouTube, TikTok, it's all on their computer screen. So, how do you control that because they're up doing their homework? And I guess they have the 12-step program for alcoholics, how to do the digital detox, they call it, when your kids are on all these things and doing everything. Is there a 12-step program for parents and for high school students or middle students, because I think they're different audiences, that parents and students can work together to really get this digital detox started?
Yeah, so there are some different detox programs, but they're not being funded well because we don't have a disorder in the diagnostic and statistical manual yet to call this a disorder. So there's a real insurance reimbursement issue here. As far as things that you can do, though, the American Psychological Association is working with the National PTA to lobby that schools stop making deadlines midnight for online assignments, because that is encouraging kids to stay online until midnight. Of course, they're going to check their TikTok at the same time. That's something we can do at the grassroots level today. The other thing we can do is we can vote with our feet. Go buy a flip phone. I promise you that once that market starts increasing, that is going to change. And people are going to say, maybe we need to make the parental controls on these smartphones a little bit easier. I feel like I need a PhD in computer science just to set up the parental controls on my kids' iPads. They're not on social media, but we can now decide what apps at what time with which people in what situations. We can set it all up, but it's so complicated. If we demand it as customers, then the companies that produce these will have to meet the demand.
We have to take back the power.
Also, I just want to say, only 200,000 parents on Snapchat use any of their features. On Roblox, only 9% of the parents use the features. And it's because these platforms don't have an incentive to market these features, and kids aren't reading the Wall Street Journal. So I just want to acknowledge that. One of the solutions that I'm working on is to help bridge that gap. I'm also starting to work with healthcare institutions, inpatient and outpatient centers, because this is a massive issue where they take kids' phones away, especially that are going through treatment, and then they go back out into the world without any sort of entry plan. So part of this healthcare piece, because to Mitch's point, we don't have we're not getting policies passed, hopefully COSA, yes. We don't have enough codes, which will change because of the issues that we're seeing. We need to start playing into the system, and it's going to cost the system some money, but parents are starting to demand it. And so I will say there is hope, and I'm also happy to share one of the partners that I'm working with that could potentially help offer this for your family.
And also, let's ask, why are Verizon and T-Mobile selling flip phones for $140, but you can get 4 smartphones for free?
Right.
Because I've met low-income parents who said, I couldn't afford a flip phone, I work nights, and I needed a way to contact my child.
Yeah.
So the old-fashioned phones
Hold on,
that we all had in
we
the
have to
90s.
have the questions on mic because this is being recorded, so I apologize.
Giving them out.
And can we bring the question? I'll repeat the question. The question is, what is the?
So,
I hope I'm not the only one in this room who's old enough to not understand many things that are being discussed. So I appreciate going to a level of concreteness so that we can learn as well. And I just heard that the difference between the flip phone and the iPhone is that you can't put the programs, the apps on.
It's the phone we had 15 years ago where you can, even 10 years ago, right, where you send text messages and you're doing this and...
Kind of like a pager.
Yeah.
It's not...
And just in response to what you were saying about YouTube, obviously there are many social media platforms. We only have a limited amount of time. They're all it's to some extent they're all somewhat involved in the same.
They're involved in this,
right?
Yeah. So look, and they're involved at a couple levels. One, we have kids who are being pushed We have a kid, it was called what is it? It was a prank, a go kill yourself prank. And so this kid attempts it, and they have all these videos this kid was getting. He was 12, I believe, and it made it look like it'd be really funny if you pretended to kill yourself. So your family member comes in and thinks that you're dead. And he tried it, and he tied the knot wrong. And he survived with brain damage. So this is, and that's YouTube. The other thing I mentioned a little bit ago, YouTube Kids. This is like the starter drug, and it's called Kids. Did you know if you don't sign on, at least I understand, if you don't get your own account and you just have it on your TV, there's no monitoring. You could have something pop up for your child that you wouldn't believe. But also, I've met parents who've tried to delete YouTube off of their TV multiple times, and they've said, please help me. My kids just put it back on.
The kids are smarter than us, let's be real. These teens, I ask them to do something, and they do it in 5 seconds, and I feel out of the loop. So,
but also ask Google, because they're giving all these Chromebooks to schools. Ask them, why are these kids getting on YouTube on these Chromebooks?
All right, we're going to take a question over here.
Hi. I have a hard time understanding who creates this like go kill yourself content, right? Because it's clearly
that's a good question.
Incitement to violence. And I'm wondering if in this legislation, if there's a requirement for these companies not only to put down the videos, but to see who it is, track it, and to report it to enforcement, like law enforcement, so we can have a system of going after the perpetrators.
But I think the other question that you're asking is who is actually making these?
Who is making these?
Right, because that's a little bit confusing, Laura.
So look, sorry, who's making them? Yeah. And can we consider it like either hateful speech or inciting violence, or something that can legally go back and put them in?
So First Amendment, right? Look, imagine a scenario, and I have many times. Imagine a scenario where we find one of these creators and we sue them and we sue TikTok, and we're in court. What do you think this creator's going to say? They're going to say, I didn't send that to a child. I didn't make it for a child. I didn't want a child to see it. I have a right to post something. And then you're going to have TikTok that says Section 230. That's what's happened, right? And so number one is, this is not, it's when we're talking about the product designs, these are not creators targeting children. These are companies targeting children. The other thing I'll say is, who are they? I mean, look at the eating disorder content on Instagram and TikTok. We see it the most. Some of these people are being paid by TikTok, right? An influencer who basically, and I've talked to 1 or 2 influencers who told me behind the scenes, they're like, hey, I get messages from TikTok all the time saying, hey, you haven't created something in a while. They put money in their bank account every week automatically. And they say, hey, try this feature, try that feature. So what do we do about that when we say, look, you're paying these people to create this content?
It is important to mention that the algorithms seem to be designed to push content that is scary or that incites anger. It's also the technique used by a number of political opponents. The reason why is because in the brain, the areas that receive that response for anger and fear feed behavior in what's called a subcortical region. It's in the more primitive areas of the brain where we have cravings and drives and habits that we don't even realize that we have, but we just have a feeling and a drive to do something. So the reason why these videos are being pushed is because it pushes that drive, that habit, such that when we do our research, kids say, sometimes I'm picking up my phone and scrolling through it before I even realize I've picked up my phone and I'm scrolling through. It's an automatic behavior. And that's very much related to the neuroscience of how it is. Is this something that the companies know about and are intentionally doing? I can't speak for the companies, but that science is broadly available, and many of the folks who get trained to do research, like me, are then snapped up by the social media companies to work for them.
For a lot more money.
For a lot more money.
I want to add something to that real quick because you asked about reporting. CSAM is the only thing that's required to be reported these days. There is legislation out there called the Cooper-Davis Act to report the drug content that's being found on social media to law enforcement, hopefully to be used in investigation. So look it up. I encourage you to look it up.
And we have parents who report. I mean, we have one family we work with, and he reported his son was being sextorted. And he even sent them the page with all the friends and family of the 14-year-old boy's pictures he was convinced to send. And there's email after email where he says to Instagram, because he tried to report it from every device, multiple accounts, he ends up finding over a dozen of this same predator, same metadata on the pictures, in fact. And he gets these messages from Instagram half the time, let's say, that say this doesn't violate our terms. Well, he is writing them and saying, children are dying. this predator sextorted my son. It took Instagram 4 days to take down the group that had been created where this 14-year-old's pictures were being circulated to everyone that person could find on this child's public profile.
And what you're saying is so critical, that feedback loop. There's no accountability for these companies to get back in dire times. Right now, we've been working with a number of groups in California on a cyberbullying bill because every week we've been getting emails from schools about deep fakes around cyberbullying, and they just continue to go on, and companies never have to get back. So we want to have it so that companies have a responsibility to get back within 24 to 48 hours and take down the content. Like, in what world can you not have a customer service team? Like, they've gotten away with this for these tech companies to be doing this, and
we have a parent that showed up at Snapchat's office because she lives nearby and said, I need to report the dealer who killed my son. And security said, it doesn't work that way. We're not a retail store. And if you don't move, we'll tow your car.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we do not have a lot of time left, so please, I'm going to ask.
I've got all day.
Well, hey, we can.
Laura has
every day,
and fair enough to say that after this concludes, you'll have an opportunity also to ask questions for the panelists that are able to stay. In the few minutes that are left, I'm going to ask for pressing questions. Who's got a press right there? Coming over. It's coming.
My name is Lisa. It's a quick call to action question. For those of us who are getting messages and things on Instagram offering to sell us all types of drugs, is there a reporting system that will be of any help or any use?
No, but record them. Screenshot them. Have your kids record them and screenshot them. Contact your police. Contact your representative. Send them all those photos. We have to, and it is a call to action because there's a movement starting and we need the numbers. So record it all. Screenshot it, report it, and record the reporting, right? So that when the time comes and some other child has died, and they go back and they look, and we're suing them, and we get discovery, and we say, oh, that's weird, because this individual reported that drug dealer 10 times, and you did nothing.
Over here.
Okay, I want to talk about at the state and national level, and whether or not there's anything happening with school curriculum, because I am the director of technology at Aspen School District, and my fight has been to get this education in our classrooms. It has been a fight that I've been fighting in schools. I'm about to cry for 10 years, and I'm still fighting right now to get this curriculum. Again, the International Society for Technology and Education, just this week at the ISTE conference that I was at, came out with their first ever curriculum around this. So we're talking that these organizations that we could have done something a long time ago, but people just keep dragging their feet. So at the state and national level, can we modify, can we say in our curriculum that this is a mandate now? Yeah. And that's what I'm waiting for, because I can't tell these principals anymore that we need to find time. And it's all about finding time, and it's all about the rigidity of state standards and curriculum and international baccalaureate standards and all these things we're always trying to do as educators that tend to still continue to be more important than this. And this, to me, is the most important thing of our time that we need to be educating our kids on. Yet, I could look at all the Colorado state standards, Governor Polis, and not see that. When is that going to, when?
At the federal level, there are no policy dollars to educate kids being proposed. At the state level, different states are talking about this, but feel really stretched. There are some ideas of having the tech companies pay for that education to use their own products safely, or to build that education, to be mandated to build that education into their products themselves. But right now, it's wonderful efforts like what's happening grassroots or private, like we're hearing about from Larissa, and some states that are able to find ways of doing this, and a lot of independently funded schools who are doing this, with just creating a tiered system.
We need schools to stand up for our kids, though, and look, let's connect after. I can get you emails and contact information for people that can help you, because there's a movement on that too, and I want to add, look, we have a number of clients now, and more every day, who come to us, and it's the same story. My child was on the Chromebook. Look, every software that a school can get, someone can build around it. My child was on the Chromebook. I have screenshots of a child in class being exploited on Discord, saying to the predator, I can't talk to you at home. My parents have me locked down. I'm on a Gab phone. I have no access. They've gotten rid of our Wi-Fi. And then you see this child being abused in class. I can't play that out loud. I'm in class right now. Many children. And when these parents go back to the school, and I've seen the letters and the emails, When they go back to some of these schools, you know what they're told? It's part of our curriculum. It's not a choice. Now, the parent can lock that Chromebook up at home, but what happens in class? So what we need is, we need schools to stand up and say, look, Google, fix your product. Get that Chromebook. You cannot tell me that Google has no possible way to shut that thing down so it's on a local network. How about that? Or so that it has limited access to educational sites. How about that? Whatever, right? Or you can disable it except in certain circumstances so that they still have the tech, but they're not being exposed to this. And a lot of people talk about parental control. Well, those parents, right? Guess what? Their Wi-Fi's gone. The Gab phone's there. They're doing everything they can. And it's not just one or two cases. We see it over and over.
I would just say, let us help you. We bring teens ask for our programming, and that's how it happens.
Well, I was gonna say,
you know.
make grassroots things happen
Yeah.
with the kids.
Yeah.
because
No,
once we get them invested in this, then that
Yes.
will work.
You guys, we have to keep the questions only on mic. Okay, so sorry, Larissa, why don't you wrap up? We are
Yeah.
at it.
I was going to say, I've been doing this work 10 years. Everyone said you'll never be able to do it. And I've been able to do more with my team in the last 3 years than has happened in the last 10. And while we want to say it's not possible, it is.
We have officially run out of time. I want to say a couple of things, though. First of all, I think most of our panelists will be available to talk after. We know that this is just really the tip of the iceberg, and there are lots and lots of questions. Hopefully, when Matt and I finish our documentary, you'll have an opportunity to see that. We're working on that with Bloomberg News and Bloomberg Originals. And what I also want to
This
say...
one, the name of the documentary.
Oh, we don't have a name yet, but we will, and we'll let you know.
It's called Perry's Picture.
I asked because I'm curious as well. I was hoping she'd tell you.
No. What I will say is the name of the documentary always comes last. So, but the point of it is also, I want to thank Aspen Institute. I want to thank Tina Brown. A lot of these, it actually, believe it or not, takes some bravery to have this conversation at a lot of these conferences that get a lot of funding from big tech. And so thank you, Tina. Thank you, Aspen Institute. Peter Colpert, am I pronouncing your last name properly? An amazing producer. Thank you for making all of this happen. And I want to end, I'm going to embarrass you, Matt, but Matthew O'Neill, my production partner, the partner on this film. Matt, stand up for a sec. Thank you. And finally, I want to thank our incredible panelists. Larissa May, Laura Marquez Garrett, Amy Neville, Mitch Prinstein. Thank you for all of the work that you're doing to make this world a better place.